All right, let's talk about a tech hobby that might just be the single most powerful tool for your career, the Homelab. But, I want you to think about it a little differently. Not as just a pile of hardware, but as your own personal practice space. So let's dive right in.
Wow. This quote it captures the entire point, doesn't it? It's not about having the fanciest equipment. It's about being that one person who's calm in the middle of chaos, all because you put in the practice when the stakes were basically zero.
And that really gets to our first big idea here, that huge, huge gap between knowing something in theory and actually being able to execute it when everything's on fire and the pressure's on.
This is the transformation we're talking about. A practice lab takes that abstract knowledge you get from a book and forges it into actual muscle memory. It's the difference between being a passenger on a plane and being the pilot who knows what every single button does.
Okay, so this brings us to a really big question. You've probably seen it, right? Colleagues spending their evenings, their weekends, tinkering with their own systems at home. And you gotta wonder, is all that effort really worth it?
Let's just be super direct about it, because it's a totally valid question. Are you actually building career-defining skills, or are you just creating a very expensive pile of electronics that's going to collect dust in the corner? Well, the answer, it turns out, it really depends entirely on how you approach it.
And this slide just lays it out perfectly. These are the two paths you can take. On one side, you've got the gear collector, right? The person who's just mindlessly following tutorials without really getting it. But on the other side, you have the practitioner. The person who is intentionally exploring, breaking stuff, and fixing things, especially the stuff they're not allowed to touch at their day job. See the difference? One's a hobby. The other is a straight-up career accelerator.
Okay, so let's get into the proof, the real-world stories. We're talking about those moments where practice doesn't just make perfect, it literally makes you the hero of the day.
I want you to picture this scene. A critical production system is completely down. The clock is just ticking away. You're on with support, but they're going nowhere, and the entire team is basically dead in the water for 18 hours. Can you imagine the pressure? And then in comes one person, an engineer who had messed around with similar setups in their home lab. They stepped in and built a working replacement from scratch. How long did it take them? 8 hours. It wasn't perfect, sure, but it saved the company's bacon. That is the payoff we're talking about.
And look, this isn't just some cool one-off story. The data, the research, it strongly supports this whole idea. When it comes to actually retaining complex technical skills, there is absolutely nothing better than getting your hands dirty. In fact, get this, studies show that students who don't get this kind of hands-on experience are 1.5 times more likely to fail. That gap between just seeing something and actually doing it, it's very, very real. And hey, on the flip side, just look at what you stand to gain. Active, hands-on practice can boost how much you remember by a massive 25 to 60%. That's compared to just listening to a lecture or reading a book. This is how you make knowledge actually stick in your brain.
Okay, I can already hear you thinking it. This all sounds great, but man, it also sounds super expensive. So let's just tackle that biggest hurdle head-on right now, the cost. Or, the perceived cost. What if I told you that you could get started for next to nothing?
Seriously, this is the #1 reason people hesitate. They go online, they see these elaborate server racks with all the flashy lights, and they just assume you have to spend a small fortune to even get in the game. But what if I told you that's just completely wrong?
The thing is, your practice space, it's probably already all around you. It can be a couple of virtual machines running on the laptop you already own. It can be those super generous free tiers that all the big cloud providers offer. Heck, it can even be that old desktop computer gathering dust in your closet, or just your regular computer when you're not using it at night.
Still not convinced? Need more proof? Okay, how about this? There's a story of one person who ran a 4-node practice cluster on a cloud service, just to learn a new skill. The total cost for a few hours of really intensive learning, 20 cents. That's less than a candy bar. The barrier here isn't money, folks. It's all about mindset.
So let's just redefine what we're talking about here. A practice space isn't about a rack of expensive hardware. No, it's just a setup that lets you fail safely, a place where you can experiment and learn without any risk of breaking something at your actual job.
And that right there brings us to the real core takeaway. We've talked about skills, we've talked about tools, but honestly, the most valuable thing you build in a practice lab, it's not technical at all. It's a state of mind. It's confidence.
Now let's be really clear about something. The problems you solve at home are not going to be identical to the ones at work. Of course not. At home, you're fighting with budget equipment and, your own dumb mistakes. At work, you're navigating crazy security rules, company policies, and, let's be honest, other people. But here's the magic. What transfers isn't the specific fix for a specific problem. It's the thinking process itself. It's that calm, methodical approach. It's the pattern recognition that develops over time that just tells you, I should probably look here first. That's what you take with you.
I mean, this quote just says it all, right? The difference between the person who freezes during a crisis and the person who just methodically starts fixing things. That difference, so often, just comes down to practice. You've put in the reps. You've built the instinct to fix, not to freeze.
And this right here, this might be the most important takeaway of this whole thing. After all this talk about servers and networking and tech, the real skill you're building, the ultimate skill, it isn't actually about mastering one specific technology.
It's the ability to just figure things out. It's that deep down confidence you get from knowing that when you're faced with a problem you have never, ever seen before, you have a process. You know how to learn, you know how to debug, and you know how to rely on yourself to find the answer. So here's your call to action, my challenge to you. Stop waiting for the perfect setup or for some perfect project to fall in your lap. Just pick one thing you want to understand better, find a safe space to practice with it, and then go break it on purpose, because that is where the real learning starts.